Hey guys, welcome to week 4. This is dynamic sketching, the master class. So yeah, first 3 weeks, know what we covered. Warm-ups, using the pen, basic materials, contour lines, organic and geometric shapes. We also covered a bit of perspective, a little bit. But today, this is where we start to incorporate all of the 5 forms. And this is going to be a bit more tricky, a little bit more difficult, because we're going to try to incorporate all 5 shapes into one. Instead of just sticking with organics or just sticking with geometrics, we're going to try to use all of them together to start creating interesting and unique shapes, whether it be random or even something that resembles something we've seen before in life. This is where also some of the things like perspective that we had talked about, the contour lines, cast shadows, form shadows can apply. But ideally, I like you guys just stick with line work. If you feel confident with the shapes that you've created, you can take it a little step further. But let me give you guys a few examples of what I'm trying to look for in terms of the 5 interrelationships. Now, I don't want you guys to just take these random shapes and just place them next to each other or layer them on top. I'm talking about literally interlock. Think of them like Lego shapes. You're going to lock them together, penetrate them, cut away, dissect. The idea that these shapes are yours to play with, that you can alter them in a certain way. And for instance, let's take the basic cube. With this shape, let's take a cylinder, and I want to incorporate and meld it into this cube. So how will we do that? And when I say that we can mold or cut away and change the shape to our advantage, you can start to interlock them. And also don't forget the idea of draw through. I've drawn one shape here, and I want to draw the second shape, the cylinder, interlocking into this form. So that means I'm going to draw through on top. So now what's happening is I've cut into this cube a little bit. And we could take it a step further, where if we redraw this cube, we can put it all the way through. Now use a different color to show the actual parts where they're interlocking and penetrating. But we're not sticking to just 2 shapes. We got 5 forms with us. So these forms can be pretty large. You can make them pretty abstract and interesting to look at. Really push these interlocking forms together. And this is pretty tricky, especially when it comes to using like an ellipse, a circle, or even the cone. That will get a little hard to deal with at first, but mainly because when you have, let's say, a cube, and you want to incorporate the ellipse or the sphere, how do you put it in there? Obviously, we could just layer it on top, but that form is cutting into it in a certain way. So if the cube is actually coming forward, we have to draw the contour line to see where that form is turning. And how that is interlocking and cutting away into the cube. A little confusing at first. I would highly suggest just take maybe 2 or 3 of the forms and learn to interlock those shapes together at first. And repeat those shapes over and over again. So I can take this cube and draw another cube on top. continue to push that, maybe it'll do a cylinder here. Do maybe another one here. The idea is to make it abstract first, to confuse your brain a little bit in terms of how do you interlock these shapes together. Eventually you'll start to get into forms where maybe we'll create things that seem a little bit more recognizable in their forms. So for instance, this basic geometric form is a tank. Also the idea that you have this form here, now let's actually cut into it. Take sections away. And make these as big as you want, as small as you want, but as you progress along, try to include more and more of these shapes together. The more you feel comfortable using these shapes together, the easier it'll be to build a lot of the things you'll see on site when we're on location somewhere, or if you're drawing in, at a coffee shop and you're trying to draw a car or a person. Everything is built up with the same shapes. So once you can understand and master how to learn all 5 forms and start to interlock them and build shapes with them, then things will get easier in terms of breaking those things down. And of course, that's the hardest thing to do, really, is learning how to see something, whatever object it is, a plant, a lamp, a tank, and recognizing the large shapes and breaking them down to the most simplistic form, which is what these forms are. And you can continue to build on top of this. Of course, we can layer some of this stuff too, so maybe we'll have another large cube coming down here. And just continue to build this out. Another trick I want you guys to incorporate is when you actually have a break or a dissection or where 2 forms meet, use a thicker pen. Build these out with like a 3, and then when you start to have these shapes connect, use a 5 and go back over these lines just to show the actual breaks. Once you get comfortable with that, look for some form shadows and cast shadows, things that you can fill in. Using some of your cross-hatching, line work. Just to break some of the planes and being able to read a little better. And also some of the form shadows. can bring in some of the highlights if you like. And try to find points where one thing is casting a shadow on top of another. And find those cast shadows. Put them in. It gives it more depth. Like I said, this one will be frustrating. Let's try to include a cone in here. Incorporate more of the other shapes. But again, you're going to have to experiment and try this many times over and over again. This will be part of your homework for this week. Before we get into the, further into the actual shapes themselves, I actually wanted to continue on, and we've hit a lot of the major points. And I actually wanted to give you guys an actual formula that you can use so that if you follow that, I mean, once you follow this form, it's 6 steps, there's no way you can mess up. We've hit the basic organic geometric shapes, contours, textures, form cast shadows. Those are your major steps. And this formula that I'm going to give you, write it down, keep it on you in your book. One, simple forms. Your 5 shapes are your simple forms. 2, your construction shapes or frame. It's kind of like the wireframing. This is where your contours come into play. 3, apply your textures. 4, your shadows. 5, details. And this is some of the stuff we'll get into a little bit more later, but this is a crucial step as well, where these first 4 steps are the ones I really want you guys to just really understand. 5 is a step that you only should take once you've mastered the first 4. Once you've gotten comfortable with the first 4, then you can start to get into 5 and 6, which are more like the glossing or the icing on the cake. So let's say we're drawing out a creature or something. If we're at the zoo, we're drawing an animal. And when you're constructing that animal, let's say a giraffe, you build it with simple forms and shapes. You add your contours, your texture, some of your shadows as well. The details, things like eyes, the patterning, hair, that's a final step. And that's something that's not crucial or even important unless this is mastered down first. If these first 4 steps aren't correct or your lane is not correct, it won't matter how much detail you put in because it's not going to look correct and it's not going to work. Last 6 will be highlights. Highlights and color. This last step, you'll use off and on. Much like 5, it's icing. It just brings your sketch up